writing the book. And it was published in 2013, like November 2012. And I self-published it. And I thought, or everyone kept telling me, don't self-publish, because if you self-publish, you will not find a publisher. I'm hard-headed, so I went ahead and self-published, and I kept going to the Book Expo of America, which is normally here, and I met the publisher that published it again. And so it came out January of 2014, I believe. And it was like a rebirth of the book again. And it had just come out like the year before. So I was like, okay, great, let's do this all again. So my journey with the book in itself, it started probably way long ago when I was 9. My mom became a Mary Kay beauty consultant, and she was looking to become a Mary Kay beauty consultant because she wanted to visit her sister in Germany, and she was looking for some extra money. And so I got to experience her like go through this whole like process of, getting her makeup kit and asking people to come to a party and all this stuff. And I had no idea, like I personally had never been exposed to makeup. I couldn't wear makeup. It was just kind of like, okay, what are you doing? And if it makes you happy, great. And when she started, I kind of started with her, and I started to go to all of her presentations and stuff like that. And what struck me was like the women that would come there. And I thought to myself, like, I'm such an observer. I just sit back and I look at people and I try and like figure out what's happening with them. Not so much on the outside, but also like what's happening in their head and why, they have a shift in perception or a shift in their mood or whatever. And so every single show my mom would do, the ladies, they would come in and they would like complain about their whatever they would complain about. And then after she was finished, all I remember is people like buying product and happy, and they were smiling and they were like, I want some more. And for me, I was like, wow, there must be magic in this makeup or something. Like, what's happening? I couldn't quite put the two together, but that's where my fascination with beauty started from. And I was really, for me, trying to figure out what is it that makes women happy, that they, either get something new, or they get their hair done, or they get their, makeup done. And I didn't quite pick it up until later on. I took a few psychology courses in college because I was really fascinated. I really wanted to know what was happening in our heads. And it wasn't until I started my career as a makeup artist about 12 years ago that I really started to get a sense for that there's a real disconnect between what we see and how we feel about what we see. Like, they don't always add up. And so it started with my whole world kind of crashing down around me as I was building up my career as a makeup artist. My first real job into the industry was, I did a few fashion shows and stuff like that, but my first real job was with L'Oreal Paris, which is based out of New York. And they hired me for their very first retail store in LA. And they hired me as a makeup artist, but they also hired me in management. And I did not want to do management. Like, I had done management. I was like, I want to be creative. I got into this to express myself and make people pretty. I didn't get into this to be in management. But I did it. And at the same time that I got that job, everything else in my life started to dwindle and take a crash and burn. I got separated from my husband, who I had been with for 11 years, and I moved out of our place, and we were both from Chicago, so I was like 3,000 miles away from home, and living in this tiny studio only because it was really close to work, and didn't really have a lot of friends and family. I had no family there. And for 8 months, I pretty much hated it. I despised that I was in management, not doing makeup, but it was kind of in the industry and like that. And I did a lot of things to try to make myself happy, you know, and every time I looked at myself, I was feeling the same way I could see those women were feeling when they first got into my mom's chair. So I would have the experience of like, I was angry, I was sad, I was upset. I couldn't, for myself, perceive myself as being like beautiful. I'm thinking, well, what is wrong with my life that, you know, I can't see my value, my worth, or that the way I feel about my looks isn't the way that other people perceive me. And so 8 months into this, it was Christmas, I would have this really sharp pain in my stomach, and it was so sharp I had actually taken myself to the emergency room. And 3 doctors later, 8 tests, 6 hours of being in the emergency room, they basically came back and said to me, "We don't know what's wrong with you." They're like, "We don't see anything, you must be imagining stuff." But they sent me home with some antacid and a $10,000 bill. And I was like, okay then. So much for not, seeing anything is wrong with me. And I went back home, and I remember I wanted to cry. Like I was upset, and I really wanted to cry. My stomach was still hurting, but I was too tired. I was just like, I'm just gonna go to sleep. This will pass. And then I woke up the next morning, and I went into work, and about 30 minutes later, they called me into the office and said I was fired. So I was alone, and I was sick. And I had no idea. I had no idea where my money was gonna come from, how this was all gonna work out. And I really didn't have a real huge savings either. So I went back home, and at that point, I literally broke down. I broke down. I had a real weeping fest, and like you have those moments where you're coming to Jesus. You're like, okay, I don't have nothing. I don't know what's about to happen. I ain't got no job. I don't have no husband. I don't have, I'm far away from home. What do we do? What do I do? And so what I did do is I actually went and rolled over on my bed, and I picked out a book that I actually have been reading on and off since I was about 15. And as I'm 40 right now, so when I think about me reading this book and picking up this book and being interested in this book in the first place, it really boggles my mind, because it was the 7 principles of the 7 laws of success by Deepak Chopra. And I'm thinking, why would a 15-year-old even be interested in this? But literally, on and off, I would pick it up and I'd read it, and I became really interested throughout the years. And so at this particular point, when I was at my lowest, I just pulled it out, and I didn't read it, but I went to the back of the book, and I was like, I'm in California. I don't have anything else to do. I know I ain't got no money, but I went and called their retreat center, and I said, when is the next retreat? And they told me the dates. I went. I didn't care. I didn't have any plan after that. But through that experience, I learned how to meditate. I learned how to eat properly, as far as how to properly eat all the food with different colors, how it digested in my system. They go through a dosha system that basically, if you're hot, then you have these certain foods. If you're cooler, you know, and it made sense at the time. But what I left with is a lot of clarity. And it was in that moment I started, those moments, because after I started meditating more, doing more yoga, my practice of meditation kept up. And it had been about a month, and I still had no job. And I had said, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna continue with makeup. So I took a class. It just so happened to be a free makeup class. And at that class, there was this young lady there, and she said, I just finished interviewing with Revlon. And I'm like, okay. She's like, oh, they're leaving, and Revlon is here in New York. And I was like, but can I interview? Like, are they still looking for people? She's like, I don't know, but here's the lady's number. And I thought that was so generous. I was like, I could be taking your job. Like, who knows? You know, like, right. She had no idea, but right. She gave me the number. I called, and sure enough, the lady was like, well, I don't know, we've, you know, done our interviewing process, but why don't you come in? Or why don't you fax us? I don't know if she emailed, fax, or whatever at the time. And I said, okay. So I did. And every single day, twice a day, I was still meditating very consistently. And I remember on a Monday, it was about 2 weeks after that. So we were like 6 weeks into being fired, still have no money, paid for a retreat, still gotta pay my, you know, like every life is still happening. And I'm like, okay. And I was meditating, and I usually cut off my phone. I never, my phone, you know, like it's on silent, and then I'll have it as a ringer so that it'll remind me to get out of meditation. And I opened my eyes before the ringer, and it was a New York number. And I'm like, do you answer or do you keep meditating? Like, here, this is a trick. And so I went ahead and I answered the phone, and it was the lady. And she's like, from New York. And she said, oh, we love your stuff. How about you come to New York and go on this tour with us? And I'm like, okay. When do I need to be there? Like, what is the job? Like, what is this? And she said, well, we need you in New York by Sunday. Mind you, it was Monday. And I'm like, oh, okay, that'll be interesting. And we'll fly you out, you know, we'll take care of everything, blah, 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 blah. But the obstacle in my space was like, well, am I paying for my, like, do I sublet my place? How do I get everything ready to leave and be gone on the road for 4 months? I'm like, who does this? I did. And so I left on Sunday. I sublet my place. I don't know how it all worked out, but God always has a way. And we got there, and the ladies asked the group, and it was literally, they picked 8 people from around the country to go on this tour and be a makeup artist. And I was one of the 8. And they asked the 8 of us, they said, well, who in here has done media? And the funny part about it is I've never really done media, but right when I started my career, there was a news reporter that came up to me, and she's like, how do you like doing the fashion show? And it went, and she printed, it was a printed article in the newspaper. And so when they asked, I was like, I've done media. Didn't know what she was talking about, but I'm like, I'll do it. And there were 3 of us that they chose to do the media. And I was the first one that went to present. And I think the first market, it wasn't New York. It was some other market. And after that, they kept me as their spokesperson for the entire 25 market tour. So I became a spokesperson for Revlon. And what I was most interested in on this tour, because I knew internally I had a mission to fulfill. And I was literally searching for information. Like what was keeping people from experiencing their own beauty? So there's a couple of questions that I would ask people when they would sit into my chair. If you bear with me for a second. The first is, when they would sit down, I would ask them, like, what makes a person beautiful, or what makes them attractive? And most people, when they hear that, they'll start describing, not necessarily features, but they'll start saying, like, oh, she has a lovely, way about her. She's so polite. I love her, like, way of, like, whatever. People never really talk about a person's features when they think about their beauty or them being attractive. If you're asking about a specific person that may be in the spotlight, maybe like Beyonce, even with Beyonce, they'll say stuff like, well, she's fierce. Well, okay, but what is attractive about, what is attractive about fierceness? And what I found about that is that people usually have the idea that beauty or attractiveness is around the way they are, as opposed to what they look like. And so that was very distinctive in the questioning. And then also the second question was, do you consider yourself to be attractive? And most people would say no. Like, they'd just be like, no. And I'm like, really? Like, it's not like you have a third eye and, your lips are, and I'm like, wow, okay. And then the last question I would ask is, what could I do for you today that would have you feel more attractive? And 9 times out of 10, they would be like, well, my nose is too this, it's too skinny, you need to do this, my cheekbones, I can't do this, da 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 da. Like, and I'm like, wow, okay, I'll do my best. And I work through it. So literally for 4 months, 25 cities across the top media markets in the country, 8 hours a day, I was spending with women in my chair every single day. And on top of that, I was doing the media. So my days were extra long because I got up really early, or they would interview me during the process and stuff like that. So after the fact, I would go back every night and I would compile like what people would say, and I would like check things off, and it's kind of like the basis of how I built the information in my book. And a lot of the physical beauty, heavily, like we heavily attribute physical beauty off of our 5 senses, right? But we don't actually consider that it's so much more than that. And I think that is what led me to say, okay, well, if we're basing it off of our 5 senses, what we could see, hear, taste, touch, all of those, the divide could be potentially that we're just not paying attention to the other half of it, which is our emotional, spiritual way that beauty has an effect on us. And it's a presence. It's who you are, it's how you speak, it's how lovely you are or not. Like if you're an angry person, people are like, nah, but if you're just a pleasant person, they tend to have this experience of you like, oh yeah, she's a beautiful spirit and all that. And so that's the basis of the book and why I chose to do it, why I chose to write the book. And what I also know is that, in my research, what none of these cosmetic companies will tell you is that possessing beauty and feeling beautiful and attractive is definitely an inside job of recognizing the divine source that we are, like our source, where that comes from. And we tend to do 3 things. One is we will create unrealistic ideals about unrealistic ideals and comparisons with other people. The other is a lack of holistic like self-care. Instead of just paying attention to the physical, there's a whole other aspect to it as well. And then the last part is unresolved conflicts and issues from our past. So these are the three things that I found were the most substantial in separating what we see in the mirror and how we feel about our beauty. And so today, I'm just gonna go through a few of them, a few of the things that within those three things that we could do that could potentially get us to help us see and feel beautiful about what we see. I don't know if you've heard this quote, but the first one is stop making unrealistic ideals based on comparisons. And Teddy Roosevelt would say, comparisons are the thief of joy, right? It's like whenever we do it, we lose a piece of joy. There's nothing, inherently really amazing or great about comparing things. And the truth is like, not only is it about us comparing like ourselves with one another or other people outside of us, the worst part is us comparing ourselves to our past or us comparing ourselves with, how we would like to be or how we should be or the way we aren't. Those are very harmful or more harmful than us just comparing ourselves to another person. When it's comparing ourselves to another person, the best thing that I could give you or give us is like use discernment as opposed to judging. Discernment, like would mean, it's not for me. Oh, that's her butt. Okay, great. That's cool, but that's not my butt. So, using discernment as opposed to judgment. And then the others would be, that are harmful. Like when a person is trying to start something. We usually try and go to the pie in the sky, the person that's, if we're starting a YouTube channel, and then we say, oh, but Oprah does such a good job. Well, sure, yeah, she's had how many years of practice, she studied in communications, she also, she has people and teams of people that are helping her with her production, and, you're looking at yourself saying, but I only have 5 people on my YouTube channel, and it's like, okay, you'll get there. You just gotta do all the practicing that Oprah did. Don't worry. Or, like with people comparing themselves to outlandish figures that we see in the media or what have you. I like to always say like, well, why would you compare yourself to like Naomi Campbell? You didn't have her parents. Like, it makes no sense. So to logically just kind of come to some conclusions about when we're going down the tunnel of comparing ourselves to other people. And like I said, the worst of it is when we're doing it around ourselves. Because we really don't get a sense of, one, being in the present moment and the glory that we are right now, but we also steal, the joy. There's so much joy that's lost when you're thinking about where you should be or where you weren't and all this other stuff. And my best recommendation, and I do it in the book, is to breathe. It's just to breathe. Because breathing always brings us back to the present. It always makes us aware, like, oh, okay, I'm right here. I'm doing this little commentary, talking about what is not right and what I could be and da-da-da-da. And literally just breathing and catching yourself when you go to that place. And the second is the whole holistic self-care. Like feeling beautiful is just not about our beauty, like our skin and our hair and all of that. It really is about nurturing our beauty and supporting and fueling us to a point where we could do whatever it is that we want to do without it being burdened. Self-care is definitely critical, and self-expression, once you are at a place of just acceptance, you could have fun with self-expression as opposed to coming from a place of like, I have to do this. I have to make sure I look like this because then I won't, or this won't happen, or whatever. But once you have a place where you could just completely be in that this is who it is, this is where I am, this is where, take it or leave it. You can have fun with it. There's so much fun to have with expressing ourselves with our hair, with our clothes, or what have you, but it definitely gets burdensome when we're coming from a place of non-acceptance or judgment of ourselves. So, I'm not suggesting that we don't take care of ourselves. That is not what I'm suggesting in the least bit. I actually like getting my hair cut and doing my nails and all this other stuff. I am suggesting that we add to the pool of things that we do for self-care, meaning writing, like journal writing is one, meditation, yoga, having group brunches with people that you enjoy, book clubs, Tai Chi, running, something that will involve your entire well-being, where it gets you involved on a spiritual level, where you can express yourself and actually, get in community with other people, then it's uplifting you. So definitely self-care and on a physical level, but also incorporating the spirit and the spiritual aspect of the person or your person. And the last one that I mentioned is deal with conflict and or resolve issues from the past. And this is probably the biggest thing that I've found keeps people from actually being able to experience themselves as beautiful. And I came to this conclusion after doing a lot of the exercises that I did for myself in my book. And part of it was learning how to meditate from the Chopra Center. I go through that exercise in the book so that people get a sense for how to be able to quiet the mind, because the mind will really mess you up. It's not necessarily, and it could be a great thing. Our mind, can create things, can, help us figure out when we're in trouble and all this other stuff. But the other part of it is like, it really will keep going on replay if we allow it to. So learning to quiet the mind is integral. And when I was 4, I was riding in the back seat of my dad's pink Cadillac. And my parents, my mom, so my dad was driving, my mom was on the passenger side, and we were in Chicago, and I remember us going to my cousin's birthday party. And so it was 1979. He had this pink Cadillac with a burgundy rag top on the top. I don't know if y'all seen it, but I remember it. And I remember something on the radio, probably float on. It was something soothing, and we were all getting in there and having a good time. And so me, being 4 at the time, I was actually counting the houses as we were going down the street. And finally we came to this house, and it was green, and I remember that house, and I was like, Daddy, 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 that's Rachel's house. And in the next instance, my mom's face started to tear up, and she was beating my dad as he was driving, and he swerved across the road. They got out of the car, they were fighting, and this little 4-year-old was in the back seat, and I was trying to get out of that car seat or belt buckle or whatever was going on then. I don't even think we had a car seat then. And they fought, and I couldn't understand it. It was like I said something, and a fight broke out. And then a cop came, they got back in the car, nothing was said. We went on to my cousin's birthday party as if nothing happened, and I was left with, what? Later I found out that Rachel was my dad's mistress, and I had no idea he had been taking me there several times. I thought Rachel was like this wonderful lady that would like play with me, and I was like, okay, great, that's Rachel's house. Let's go play. And, you know, before that day, what was true is that my dad and I, we had a really great bond. We had like a very special and very deep bond. We were like peanut butter and jelly. Everywhere that man went, I was with him. I was on his back though, because he didn't believe in carting me around in a stroller. So everyone would call me the backpack kid. And I loved my dad. It was an amazing period, being 4 and loving your dad. And after that day, I completely lost interest in my dad. I had, I lost faith in him. I thought he betrayed me, he betrayed my mom. It was really challenging for me to understand as a 4-year-old, like what was happening. And just as quickly as like my love for my dad turned to like this, I gotta figure out who you are, I lost a piece of me. That rambunctious, outgoing, loud, outspoken girl turned into this very timid, self-conscious, person. And I attribute that to feeling like my dad didn't love me and he didn't feel like I was beautiful. And so I stopped being beautiful to me. And all through the time that I'm doing the research for this book, I started to find out that more and more people, that I'm not alone. We often attribute how we look with the way we feel about the people in our lives or our past. And if you do not believe that you are a mirror of your thoughts, think again. So any hatred, any bitterness, any pent up fear about who they are is also the same that you see about yourself. And I think it's so critical in a really massive way that we really start to shift our focus from just the exterior of how we're looking to actually how are we feeling about our past, our relationships. How do they affect how we see ourselves? And I have some, I honestly am a fan of Instagram, and I'm a fan of Facebook, and I'm a fan of social media and all this other stuff. I really am. And I really think that even though we're using it as a means to say, like, I'm here. Here I am. See, look at me. Look at me. Look at me. The more we're just attracted to the attention that that's giving us, and we're deflecting the fact that there's other things that we're not dealing with around our emotional well-being or body, becomes a bigger issue. I don't know if you've heard of or are familiar with the Dalai Lama. Have you heard of the Dalai Lama? So I saw the Dalai Lama speak in California. And at the time, Marie Shriver, she was like the mayor's wife. Boo. But anyway, and I saw him speak. But in 2009, he said at the Peace Summit that the Western woman would actually save the world. And when he said that, I actually got excited because I felt like I'm on purpose. I felt like if I can get other women to get that who they are, all of who they are, their beauty makes a difference and it matters in the world, one of the women that I talk to will be that woman because she'll get out of her way. I feel like a lot of times we're just looking at our physicalness and not paying attention to our allness, that we miss that yes, your beauty can be an asset to all the other things that you offer, and it's time to save this world. You know, like we are up against some really challenging things in the world, and it is time that we figure out we can use it all. We have that power. It is within us. I'm a self-proclaimed feminist, but I think all men who love their mamas are feminists as well. And it's a message that needs to be heard so that we can bring up really strong women that love all of who they are and can see that their intrinsic value is not just in what they're looking like, but also in what they provide as a service to the planet, as a service to the community, as a service to, you know, their neighbor. You know, we're all trying to somehow be a Kim Kardashian, and I don't even understand her role in the whole thing, but God bless America. Maybe she is going to save something. Yeah, who knows, right? I don't know. But it's up to us. It's up to us to instill a message of empowerment for women that it's not just about what you look like, but it is what you look like. Because if your looks are part of who you are, don't be ashamed. Get it done and move on. Keep it going. Let's get it going. So that, in a nutshell, is Fearless Beauty 360. There's a ton of other exercises in there that really helps a person to come to grips with forgiveness, also taking responsibility for your feelings. My belief is that you can forgive anyone. You absolutely can forgive anyone. No matter how harsh the circumstances or event was, you absolutely can forgive anybody. I think a lot of people get tripped up on forgiveness when they think that, you know, the forgiveness is for them, is for the other person. You know, and in part it is. In part it is, because you're literally breaking the tie, untying the knot that binds the two of you and setting yourself free so that you can do what you came to do and they can go ahead and get on with their life. But the truth is, most people don't know that they hurt you in some way. And even if they do know, I'm a firm believer in that people do the best that they can at the time that they're in. And sometimes when we get frozen in a moment in time, like I did with my dad, you think like, no, that's who he is. And the reality is, like, I didn't talk to my dad for years, and he raised me. He raised me, and my parents are still together. My mom is still in Mary Kay. Like, all of that is like a constant. But the truth is I stayed stuck. I stayed stuck in that 4-year-old body saying, something's wrong. He's not right. He's hurting my mom. And when I forgave my dad, which was, I thought, partly a miracle, I was around 26. And when I say I did not speak to my dad, I really didn't. I would sit at the dinner table, and mind you, this is how awkward it was. There's 3 of us. I don't have brothers and sisters. And I wouldn't talk to the man that was sitting at the table. I'd say to my mom, would you have him pass the ketchup? And it was how awkward it was. And so finally, when I went ahead and I called my dad, And we were talking about landlines, which is so funny, because I actually had a landline. And I would pick up my phone, because I was like, I gotta let him go. I gotta let this go. I gotta let this go. I kept repeating things that felt like they were my dad. And so for me, it was necessary. Like, I was like, you know what? I'm probably not going to do any more than I've already done if I cannot do this. And so I called him, and I got to I don't even know how many numbers are in a number anymore. How many numbers? You're like 7, 8, 9, 10, right? So I was dialing the numbers, and I would get to number 10 on the phone, and I'd be like, no. Like, I would hang up the phone right before it would start to ring. And then finally, I did. I went ahead and it rang. And I remember like it was yesterday. He answered the phone. My mom always answers the phone. And I'm like, I thought I was going to get off the hook. At least be like, oh, he's not home? Okay, great. He answered the phone. And I'm just like, ugh. And I asked him, I said, could you do me a favor and not say anything until I'm complete, till I'm finished? And literally, this is the first time I'm talking to him. And he said, okay. And, excuse me, because it's really present. I said, you know something? I've been really angry at you. I've been blaming you for everything. What I felt you were not to my mom, for not showing me how a man should love a woman, for, disrespecting my mom, for disrespecting our family, all the things I thought were happening. And he listened. And he listened, and he listened, and I expressed myself, I think for the very first time since I was probably 4. And at the end of it, he was dead silent. I just knew if there was a way that he could reach through the phone and choke me, that was gonna happen that day. And I was so petrified, and I was shaking, and I was just like, okay, I'm done. And it was in that moment when he said to me, he goes, I hear you, and I'm sorry. He was like, when you were born, I was 21, and if I would have known better, I would have done better. And I'm like, okay. Like, it was that easy. And, most of the things that I had run in my head about who he was and what he wasn't, and he didn't even remember. He's like, I did that? I was like, yeah. It was like, of course you did. You don't remember that? No. The people that we most likely need to forgive probably don't have a clue as to how they've affected us or what's happened to us. And for the first time that I could hear of, and honestly, it was the first time that I think he actually said it to me, he said, I love you. And that was something we never did as a family. He never said it to my mom out loud. I never said it to him. It was just something between our little triangle that didn't happen. And he said it. And literally, every time I talk to my dad, I feel like that backpack kid again. I love my daddy. And I know I promise you, it's so strange because I know a lot of women have this tension between their dad and them. But when I talk to a guy that might want to date me and they're like, they think, every girl has a daddy issue. And I'm like, I love my daddy. I don't know what you're talking about. I love my daddy. And I feel like literally all those years of unforgiveness, I don't really I felt like it was wasted. But also it was kind of like it was erased. It was erased. And that's the beauty, I think, of forgiveness. It's like a burden that's destroyed. And I can't explain it any other way than that. One of the things that did come from it is I actually shaved my hair because of forgiving my dad. That week that I did it, it was a Sunday when I called him and we got straight. I went through like 5 different hairstyles. I was braiding it, the braids were too tight, I took the braids out, then I was like, I'm gonna put a weave in, I took the weave out, and finally I went to my beautician and I was like, you know what, I think I'm okay. I think I feel very free. I think I've let a lot of stuff go. I think it's time for my hair to go. And she had been asking me to shave my hair for 5 years. And I was like, what? Like, what beautician does that? They don't do that. They always tell you to keep your hair. Why you gonna cut your hair? And she was like, she literally would ask me, can I cut your hair? Can I cut it? Can I cut it? I'm like, no, why would you want to cut my hair? And then I got it. It was time, when it was time to let it go, it was time to let it go. Yeah, and so it's been a good 16 years since then. So if y'all thinking about it, go ahead and do it, it grows back. Yeah, right? That's a whole nother, like, man, that's another book. That's a whole nother book, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'd love for if anyone has any questions.